am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Kristi Vitali, whose desire is to facilitate the process of healing via self-discovery and self-awareness, so that you can discover and release self-limiting behaviors and beliefs, and unconscious holding patterns in the body that cause pain and create suffering that hold you back from your best self. Through her integration of the John F. Barnes myofascial release approach, integrated life coaching, self-care, and mindfulness-based practices, she embarks on this journey with you. She is a myofascial release specialist and a physical therapy practitioner of over 23 years, as well as a yoga instructor and certified life coach. She is the founder and co-creative director of Be Well Austin Center and Yoga House. During my interview with Kristi Vitali, we discussed the impact that her parents had on her belief systems and what created the courage she needed to set her own path. Learn how the fabric of our families that extend beyond our parents can repeat. I am hopeful that with some of these wellness practitioners that I've brought on over the past few months are helpful in your journey of finding what works for you as far as wellness, as far as breaking your belief systems, so that you can find those moments of stillness that you need in your day to create less stress and better energy so that you're better for those people around you. Now for my interview with Kristi. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, and I'm here with Kristi Vitali today. And Kristi, do you want to start off and just give us a little background on yourself?
Would love to. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here and a gift to be here. And I have been a myofascial release specialist physical therapist for, almost 25 years now. So I've been doing this work. My heart and soul work has led me to my work with individuals who are really have an elevated sense of purpose and a deep commitment to themselves and their life and their healing journey. So my work as a physical therapist also dovetails with my work as a coach, personal development coach, and a women's health coach, and also intertwines with some of the yoga training like you, Amy. We kind of combined all of these worlds and kind of mindfulness-based practices. So this is the work that I do and calling it Connective Wisdom.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So important and really, especially in the times we've been through this past year and everybody's personal lives of things that happen anyways. I felt like this conversation was really important and to hear your wisdom for everybody. So let's begin. Let's talk a little bit about your story. So where did you grow up? Maybe tell me a little bit about your family and what they did.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I was born. And I'm laughing because Amy, you asked me how to say my name. I said, Vitali, that's Italian. But in Tulsa, we said Vitali. And I was Vitali. That's what people call me, Vitali. So my name, I'm honored to have my name. So from my birth, this name, Vitali, and the vitality. So I carry that name. I carry it lightly, but I also carry it, I kind of weave it into what it is that I do and what we're doing here and in these times. So from my birth in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I was born of my parents who were both second generation. And actually my dad was first generation here, and his parents came over from Italy. So his father and his mother came over, and they met actually in America when they were, in their 20s. And my mother's family came from Germany and France. So those were kind of my roots. And what I know more about really.
How did they end up in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Oh my gosh. Do you want to know?
Yeah.
So I know much more about the Italian side of the family. So I'll share a little bit about that. They came over, I think by way, through New Orleans, through the port of New Orleans. And I know the conversation that you had with Emily and what came up after that, and your kind of notes after, like the immigrant, like our ancestors and just even one generation back, what they went through not that long ago to be here. So they went through a lot of hardship to get here. A lot of them got sick on the boat and died and had malaria once they came to New Orleans, and they traveled up the river. And I think they ended first in St. Louis.
Okay.
They were in St. Louis for a while, and there's a lot of Italians in St. Louis. And my family, they ended up in a tiny little town. It wasn't even really a town, off of Route 66 called Fanning, Missouri.
Okay.
And this town, I think the other nearest small town is Cuba, Missouri. And then the other nearest town is Rolla, Missouri, which there's a university there. And my dad did go to that university eventually, but they.
And how old was he when he came over?
Oh, so my grandfather, I think, was 13, and my grandmother was 8.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we met here, and they opened, after they met and they got married, they opened a general store in Fanning, Missouri. So my family, they're the immigrant entrepreneurs. They opened the general store, which it also was the post office, the butcher shop, the just thinking about this. And when you're asking this question, I'm like, oh, it warms my heart. They were like the heart of the community.
Right.
So they provided that. And then my grandmother's brother opened a tavern next door.
Okay.
So they had the tavern right there. And so I guess behind the tavern and the grocery store, it's interesting. I was just home visiting my mom. It was her 89th birthday last week. And she gave me this. She's like, here, she's like, I want you to have this. My father, rest his soul, passed in October of 2020. And so she's been going through a lot of things from his life. And she came across this notebook my cousin had made, the history of the whole family. And she gave it to me. So I just received this a few days ago.
Oh, cool.
All the pictures. And she was showing me behind the store and the tavern were the houses. Like their home was attached to the store. She's like, we lived in that store. And when my dad went away to the Korean conflict, my mom, who was 8 months pregnant, lived there with my grandmother and my grandfather. So she has a really close relationship with them. The stories you can imagine are pretty wild, just being there with the whole family. All the Italians were there. The tavern was next door. They built houses behind the tavern and the general store where the family lived. So it's just everything was centered around this place and centered around food and drink and nourishment.
Right.
Which I think is super, super sweet. But my 2 older sisters were both born there in Cuba, Missouri. And my dad was born, he's a twin.
Oh, okay.
My brother were born in the back of the store.
Oh, wow.
Yes. To a mother who was 45 years old, and at that time was unheard of.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. I mean, it's like nothing now at 45.
They were also the hospital.
I know. I mean, just hearing that,
I know.
That makes the rest of us, like, we have all the birthing centers and all of these things that are wonderful.
Right.
Look what they were willing to do. Look at the discomfort, right? And so it's a beautiful story, just kind of how the life centered around that store and the tavern. And I think the tavern is still there. And the store got rebuilt. I think they tore it down and someone rebuilt it.
Okay.
So they came here and planted their grapes and had made wine and grape jelly and made their own cheese. They did everything. It's just like a little Italy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Mhm.
So your father was born there, and then where did he go from there?
Well, he was born there and went to high school, met my mom in high school at Cuba High.
Okay.
And they were an item all through high school. And then they got married, got pregnant with my sister.
Oh, okay. So she was pregnant in high school.
No, I don't think so. I think they got married after high school. But my dad, soon after they got married, and I think my mom, she was 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
He got drafted. So they were young, I think 21, 22.
Right.
My dad got drafted and he went away to Korea.
Oh.
For 16 months.
For how long?
16 months.
16 months.
Yeah.
So he didn't ever see his daughter.
Mm-mm. I think I'm trying to remember, was it 16 months he was gone? He came back and she could talk enough to say, that's my mama,
Oh, wow.
So, the family tradition is, it's just beautiful to see how my mother was embraced by his family. Her mother and her father died when she was young, and her mother as well. So they really embraced her. So that has also been her family, since she was in high school. So my dad, went away to Korea, came back. He had my little sister to contend with. And then I think soon after he came back, he then went to Rolla School of Mines and he became an electrical engineer.
Oh, okay.
He was the first in his family to go to college, and he kind of changed the mold, and he was also the first one to leave there. So he went from there after he finished college. I guess, he got job offers all over. There was a great need for engineers at that time. My mom was just telling me this weekend. And, he had job offers in California and on the East Coast and even New Orleans. And he got a job offer in Tulsa. So that's how it happened.
Ah, got it. That's how the Vitalis got to Oklahoma.
And people were like, where are you going? And the story goes that my sisters, when they were driving here, this was, I think, in 1969. The story goes that when my sisters arrived here, my oldest sister, Nancy, she was very upset. And they were eating at this little restaurant, and she was upset because she said, Mom, she started crying. And my mom said, what's going on? She said, Mom, where are the teepees? I mean, she really thought, and she's like, where are the horses and the cowboys? It's just like a home. I don't understand. So they really thought that there was going to be, cowboys here and teepees and hitching up to the post. And that was kind of the story. I think it's been like that for not, I had people ask me that when I was little, like, oh, do you have No, we have houses.
Was that from a TV show or something?
Must have been, I'm sure.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that people view things in a certain way based on visuals they've seen or...
So it's a beautiful thing. And I think my dad, like what he carried on was kind of his courage, to do something a little bit different and to step out and to get his education and, do something different than the generation before him. So he was an innovator in that way. And I know it was very important to him to support his family, but the time he went back to school, he had 2 little girls. So
I would also think this is a big shift for the family too, because if you were all living around this general store, having a village, I would rather than, you guys being on your own, Has your mom ever reflected upon how hard that change was? Because if she didn't have her family and his family was kind of her support system, I wonder if that changed her at all during that transition.
Definitely. And she's talked about that. It was very interesting. When I was home, we actually found letters that were from my grandmother, my mom's name is Mary. My parents are Mary and Joseph.
Oh my gosh.
Baby Jesus. We have a baby Jesus somewhere in the family. So, no, they're Mary and Joseph. And
that's funny.
And then my grandmother, my dad's mother, her name is also Mary. So okay. I found letters that were from my grandmother Mary to my mom and dad after they had moved. And it was just, one of those things. She would just write about the most simple things, just the daily, like, I saw Aunt Carrie today, and she'd talk about the trees and the weather and who else she had talked to. She talked about what was happening in the very moment.
Very present moment.
Yeah. And I was so moved by that and that availability. I think in our time right now, it's letter writing is like a thing of the past, right? Yes. People don't really write letters. And, I feel like when I sit down to write a letter, it's like, it needs to be like some kind of novel or,
right.
Epithet, something that is, I don't know, might be telling a story of some kind, but she was just writing about the very moment.
Stream of consciousness. Yeah.
So precious.
Yeah.
And so in that, it just made me cry to read the words and just, that we went to church today and who we saw, and we drove back and we stopped at the farm stand, and then just feeling that she was probably missing them in those.
I bet. Well, both, right? Like, I'm sure your mom felt pretty isolated.
Yeah. And, my mom is kind of like, she's a little bit of like, she's like, oh, we can do this, that's where I get my our charge, And so my mom is she's got a little bit of fire in her. Right now, and she's still a little spicy, Oh. So this is, I think that kind of was how she saw it. And she may have been some of the encouragement behind, like, let's do this, And I'm very, very grateful that they made the move they made,
Yeah.
A wonderful home base for all of us. Two of my siblings, we've all moved away, and two of my siblings are back there with their kids. So, and it's a wonderful home base to go back to.
So what, first off, how often did you see your grandparents after that?
Oh my gosh. So I didn't, because I was born after they moved to Tulsa. Mm-hmm. So I did not see, my grandfather passed before I was born. So the only living grandparent I had was my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And because she had my father when she was 45, she was 94.
Oh, wow.
Lived to be 94, but when she died, I was only 6.
Right.
So I know her very well. I know her as a 6-year-old. So we would go back probably 2 or 3 times a year. We would go, and the whole big family would be there. I have lots and lots of cousins. And that time was really, really sweet. And, Missouri wasn't really a home for me, but it was a place to visit and get to feel that connection of the huge family. This is a huge network of family and the community that was there. And I can only imagine, how hard that must have been for my parents to leave, but they didn't really talk about that a lot.
Interesting. Yeah. I wonder, because that's what I was going to ask you is like, from your dad or your mom's perspective, how it changed them to leave the family, because that's a very networked in, you're kind of isolated, in a town like that, very much in the fabric of a family. Yes. So to not only go to college, but take on a whole new lifestyle you've never been used to before. It's almost like immigrating again.
Exactly. I said that. It's like he did. And it's overwhelming to me sometimes. I don't know if you think about this. I know you said your family's from Russia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What they went through to get here.
Yeah.
Was there something really horrible happening where they were, or
Yeah.
what was it that was propelling them? So
Well, my family, it was, they were Jewish. So they were trying to get to freedom.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, and then that whole community was kind of, in where they were in St. Paul, Minnesota, but really trying to support one another to get out of the situation there. It's just interesting. My grandfather became a CPA in the very beginnings of being a CPA, but it was looked at like, this is what's going to get you out of the situation you're in. And then he went and helped all of his siblings to get to college. And, I know there was one story where he saved up to get his sister a fur coat because he thought she'd find a better husband when she went to college. So like stuff like that, but it's just, when it is like, within this 100-year span or whatever it is, it's pretty amazing how our lives are, with the risk they took. And even the first person to go to college, that's still like, there wasn't scholarships, there wasn't grants. You still had to get accepted. And for being Jewish, that was hard to get accepted into a college. And so it's just interesting, like, how do you evolve and how do people still get along? Like, I don't know. It's just like, which way is better? Like they had this like family that was tied together, but then he has to be isolated to kind of change his life, and then how does that affect the fabric?
How does that affect the fabric? And that kind of makes me, when we talk about beliefs too,
yes,
like there's the beliefs that we say we have, and then there's the beliefs that are the really unconscious, like deep inside. And then like knowing like what unconscious belief system they had to get them to this new place. Like your family from Russia, my family from Italy. Yeah, it was horrible. It was Mussolini, and like they ran out of food on the farm. The farm wasn't big enough to feed the family. So they risked their life, got on a boat, which they didn't really know where they were going.
You're just ending up somewhere.
And they just end up.
It's not like you have somewhere to go. There's not a hotel.
No. And then they were in this like malaria-ridden area, and when they got to America, so they really had to fight. But there was something in them that propelled them. So I can only think that like you and I have that in us, and that my dad had that, like maybe even unknowingly.
Right.
He was pretty risk averse. He wanted to stay safe most of the time. So for him to do that. But I think the bottom line was where they were, and for his field that he had chosen, there was really no opportunity.
Right.
For an electrical engineer in Fanning, Missouri.
Right.
So, and he had the family to support, and there was a part of him willing to go. And I know there was a part of him that was just clinging to his mom.
Right.
His dad had already passed by then. So, just recognizing those parts and like, what is it that drove them and got them here, in our families from across the ocean, that there was something operating and driving within them that was part of a belief system that was really helpful for them to survive.
Right. So how do you think that belief system helped you, or was something you had to overcome as you grew up?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Ooh. Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's like, you ask that, and I know some of it's really not conscious,
Right. Yeah.
Thinking about it, I'm like, what was I doing? Like, yeah, I think one of the things is in sports, like playing sports. I love playing sports, and I played basketball and softball and track, and being very active. And I think there's part of me that was always, as a little girl, I was very quiet, shy, more reserved. I was like good at being, being the quiet, good girl. And so some of those things helped me to overcome. I don't want to say even overcome, because that part of me is still there, and I appreciate her now more. But there was that part that probably was driving me to like, oh, go do these things anyway. Like you might be afraid, or you might be feeling shy, or afraid to talk to somebody, but hey, go do it anyway, there's that piece. So those two pieces I feel like really balanced. I see that in my dad, and just taking that direction and trusting that, there's an element of that trust, and there's something kind of that in the unconscious. So there's the beliefs too that like don't serve us. I'm like, oh, that's kind of an unconscious belief that can serve us. Wow. It's like something just told me, and I trusted it enough to go do things anyway. Got involved in Girl Scouts, and I was always really involved in school. And where I may have been a little bit shy or socially unsure, I still enjoyed those things anyway. And I found a way to connect with people that was nourishing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that probably came through. It's that thing that like, okay, we know you're afraid, but go anyway. Trust what you're feeling.
Was there any time that proved that to you? Like you would go back to and be like, yeah, I pushed myself past my comfort zone. Oh. And that's why you started like going, yes, I'm quiet and shy, but I'll push past it. Like, was there a moment that you think changed that, or was it something your parents said?
I remember there's a couple of things when you asked me about my parents. So I remember one of the things my dad did, again, he was a very gentle, quiet soul, just sweet man. Just, I think of him and it's just this gentle love that I feel. Right. Yeah. And he had a way, my mom was a little different. She's a little different. She's a little fire. I got a little firecracker, and so he's the gentle soul. And he would say things to me like, he never would be like, you need to do this or you need to do that. I remember him saying to me, do what you love. And he would say this, like I was in college trying to pick a major, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to sit at a desk.
Right.
Do something you love. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what I love. I didn't know. And, when you're in college, you really don't, you haven't had the experience of, working different jobs or working with different people in that way. You've kind of been in, like you said, in a little bit of a bubble of your friends. And so he would say that to me, and, there's something about that stuck with me. And so that really propelled me to choose what I chose as my career. Mm-hmm. Right.
And what was your major?
Well, my major was psychology and biology. Mm-hmm. And then I did that in order to prepare for physical therapy.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, physical therapy was kind of like what I was going for. I knew what I didn't want, right? Mm-hmm. I knew I didn't want to sit at a desk. And he said, do what you love. So I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to do something where I sit at a desk. And I remember my mom specifically, like she had been to physical therapy. And she said to me one day, well, why don't you come with me to physical therapy? She's like, it's something, I think you might like it. It's kind of involves, the body and, exercise. And, I was always very athletic. And she's like, why don't you just come with me for, to see what it's like? And so I went. And I'm like, this is interesting. So I think there was that piece that also kind of the more quiet or reserved, shy one that's inside, mm-hmm. who's also like unsure or doubts herself in a decision.
Right.
So I can feel that from a young age, like, wanting to do the right thing and not wanting to hurt any feelings or to be the good girl. And, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. I better be good. So there's that piece that which maybe was not the best thing long term, mm-hmm. but also I found a way to move through that and to work with that. And so I can see my dad's guidance was like literally his deal, and he was into this in Girl Scouts. He was the dad that would go on campouts that taught us to use a compass. Have you ever used a compass?
Yeah, I'm not good at direction, period.
No, I mean, a compass, you think, a compass is here to help you find your way, but it's complex.
So complicated. Yeah.
And he would be like 5 paces and this and that. And I'd be like, what? I don't understand. And I'd get so frustrated, and he'd just kind of chuckle, and he didn't get, it wasn't like, oh, you have to figure this out. He would just keep on doing his thing and be like, oh, well, let's try again. Let's do this. And he loved it. So he was the compass guy. And matter of fact, Oh, I was going to bring it in here. I found, this might make me cry a little bit.
Aww.
After he passed in October, I opened the drawer next to his bedside drawer next to his bed. And I mean, it just almost just blew me away because it was a memory of him I was having when I was sitting. I had the gift of being by his side for the month as he was dying. And I see that as a beautiful, beautiful gift to be with him. It's just so much love there. And he had lost his voice and he couldn't speak, so we had to be really close in. And I was having a memory I shared with him of him being the compass guy on the camp outs. I was like, I remember you, like you were the one who like put up the tent for us. And, he was the one that kind of held this gentle container for us in the Girl Scout troop when we went camping. And I said, I remember that compass. And I'm not kidding you. After he died, I opened the drawer to his bedside table, and in the drawer, what is there but that freaking compass, that very one. And it had a Girl Scout emblem on it. And I was like, oh, and he kept it in his bedside table. So there was something really meaningful for him too in that. And when I found it, I still have it. It's by my bedside now. But that was kind of his way, like to give the compass instead of do that.
Like not the end result. It's more like you find your path to get there.
Yeah, find your way. And which was at the time may have been a little frustrating, but now I'm glad that I had to do that.
Yes.
And I realized what his gift and his like teaching, if it were, it wasn't until he was gone that I realized the potency of it in that way.
Yeah.
So the compass is really, that's something that I feel like in working with people and doing this connective wisdom and work, it's really like finding your compass, like finding your own compass and not someone else's idea of what is right for you. So I feel like I had that, my mom was a little more directive, but she also knew I was shy and would just say, she would say, why don't you go talk to so-and-so? Or, she would just give me a little nudge. She'd kind of encourage me and recognize what she saw in me.
Right. So you had the encouragement and the gentle support.
Yes.
That you weren't going to fall if you made some adjustments along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was the other part of me that wasn't shy and that talked a lot.
Yeah. Well, and you became an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah. So
how did all that come to be?
Oh, that's a great question too. The physical therapy offered something that was really a stable career. Physical therapy was when I applied for PT school, it was very, very competitive. And people were like, you better have a plan B because most people, there's 30 positions here and 1,000 people apply. So, I thought, okay, so I did have a plan B and was to be an occupational therapist, but physical therapy really helped give me a container to work with something I was very interested in, the body. And I had, since I was a young age, a strong desire to help people. And my mom had a dear friend. She was my godmother, Dorothy. She became pretty ill when she was in her late 40s. She is diabetic, type 1 diabetic, and she went blind, her kidneys failed. And so my mom would take her, she and I would take her, to dialysis and helped her. And she had been her dear friend. They played tennis together. So I remember there was a moment there where I committed to, I want to help people. She was an inspiration to me. So that's what physical therapy offered. And it was a conduit for, finding something that wasn't behind a desk.
Right.
That I enjoyed and that I could move my body and I could help people. And so that's where it started. But it was soon after that, I had pain all through PT school. I had back pain. Be a runner and I ran off a curb one day and a lightning bolt went through my leg and up my spine. And from that day I had pain for 5 years and nothing really helped. I had sacrum, low back pain, and I had all kinds of physical therapy treatment. I mean, I love physical therapy, but whatever was happening, it wasn't helping me. And then I thought, oh, there's something really wrong with me. And it wasn't until after PT school, I went to my first myofascial release class. And about 5 days later after the class, I was like, wait a minute, my sacrum hasn't hurt in about 5 days. And I got so curious about it. I'm like, what is this? We learned to release some of the connective tissue, and I just kept going back to classes. And so that led me into the myofascial world, which is my specialty. And really, it was my gateway drug, as I call it, to the healing potential of the body and the infinite wisdom that's contained within the body. That's not just physical. Mm-hmm. So really the entrepreneur piece came through that, the PT, the myofascial work. I worked in someone else's clinic, and then I had my own little healing crisis. I kind of hit the ceiling where I was working, and it came in the form of my neck hurting this time. And then like my hands and legs would go numb. It was a crisis. Crisis in my life. I had to stop working. It was very upsetting. I was terrified. And what I realized through that process is like, literally I'd hit the ceiling there.
Right.
And so that led me to a lot of deep work around like my voice, like sharing my voice and my truth and asking for what I want or what I need. That was very difficult. I had to ask for help. Like I couldn't do things. It was horrible.
Right.
Horrible, Amy. It was terrifying to me. It was terrifying for me to ask someone to lift a box.
Yeah.
Horrible. So that was my crisis, and I had to move my way through that. And in that moment, so I had to leave my job. I left my starter marriage, which was a lovely, lovely thing. But like all of these things happened at once. And I started my own practice when I could barely move my body. But I had to do it. I needed to make money. And then I remember my schedule would fill, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this. Why are these people calling me? Don't they know And then I would just go work, and there was something grounding about it. And in the myofascial work, we're connecting to the body, hands-on. We're also connecting to the energy of the person, and we have to become present first in our own self. Mm-hmm. So that's required. And so that's what healed me.
Yeah.
Is doing the work. I did receive work, but my neck, again, I had a disc that was really, really unstable, and I couldn't really even get treated in that way. But showing up for my clients, for my patients, I had to show up for myself first, be grounded and centered in order to, put my hands on them with whatever was going on there. So that was how my practice started. And I worked out of my house.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so applicable to so many professions. It's when you're dealing with customers or clients. I had an interaction yesterday, through email with somebody, and you're like, whatever that person is dealing with in their day, they didn't take a moment to be present before they sent that email. And, we often forget, like, we're there to serve others no matter what our job is, because we get so wrapped up in all the other things that we've got in our day or demands we have. And then it turns into excuses. Like, I think one of the things, and, that I've heard over and over again for, stress or behavior that's, maybe you don't see yourself as doing that before. It's like, well, it's COVID.
Yeah.
COVID, because of COVID, it's like, well, actually, and everything you're describing is going through the hardest stuff is, sometimes when that's the challenge in our life is to be uncomfortable and still show up in the way we want to show up.
Oh my gosh. You totally just hit on something that I like wrote down this morning. I want to share. Part of this is like, are we willing to get comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is.
And not blame the outside for it, right? Like if it's not COVID, it's something, you dealt with the death of your father would have happened.
Yeah.
COVID or not. Right. Like, and that just, those things, I had a teacher training class during quarantine, or it was like soon after, and things were going very wrong for the people in the class, with deaths and other things going on in their families. And they kept saying, well, it's COVID. And I said, it's interesting because these things would have happened anyway.
Yeah.
But we had to sit in it.
Yeah.
Like normally we'd be running around, we've been traveling, we'd be busy at work, whatever it is. But actually, because of this, we've had to sit in it and feel it, and we can't escape it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I use the lotus flower a lot. It just resonates with me as like, it's that mud that we grow something beautiful. Like when you start being aware of, when you stop for a moment and just taking your story, it's like, you went through all of that, but look at this beautiful thing you've created for other people, of how you're healing them, which is also a representation of, the honoring your parents, of the guidance of, the compass of, there's not a right path. Like you kind of follow your inner guidance, but know through hard work and passion, there's going to be a result that's good for you and for the people around you. It's just finding that pathway. And there's people always want the answer, right? Like we get really uncomfortable when we don't know the answer. And I think if anything this year, it's like, there's been many times I haven't known the answer, and it's like, you just have to know what do I know? What can I control and focus?
Yeah. Another thing I got out today is funny. I have this thing on my bathroom wall. It's the Serenity Prayer.
Oh, yes.
And I see it all the time, and I hear it.
You want to read it? You want to read it for those that can't see it? Yeah.
Yeah. So the Serenity Prayer says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that describes what you're saying. It's like, that's like the COVID thing. It's like, oh, there's certain things we need to accept about life right now. This is the bubble that we're in. We all bought the ticket. Apparently we bought the ticket to this ride. And so it's like knowing the difference, like, there's things that we can change and move forward with anyway. And having the courage to confront those things and just to like follow the little breadcrumbs or the little yeses that you get, or watch for the no's, and then there's some of it that we can't change. Right. So work with what we can, and then let the rest go. And then I think the prayer there, the ask, is for the wisdom to know the difference, because I think we see it. Like I see this, like the COVID bubble, right? That's like, used to be like real close into us for a while. It was like COVID, it's like every minute. Yeah. And now it's out here. But
it's still something people will blame.
Yeah, it's an edge. Yeah. Feel it, and it's like not so directly in our face, and it's out here, and we have a little more spaciousness. But when stuff happens, like it goes, boom, it hits against that wall, and then it's like it still intensifies things. Yeah. It's like, it's the container. We've kind of gotten used to the container, and then we forget, and then something else happens, or there's a lot of loss happening right now of all kinds. Totally. Yeah. Loss of jobs, loss of careers, loss of family members, and not just from COVID, but it does kind of ricochet off of the bubble, and it gets really intense.
Well, and that wisdom to trust your inner compass. Like there's so many times any of us know when we go against it, we feel it, right? And that guidance your Father's giving you and it goes along with the Serenity Prayer, is basically like have the courage to listen to it, to honor it, right? Like, because most of the time you'll fight it with your rational mind and be like, no, that won't work, or that's not safe, or that's not the right path to go. But something inside of you just viscerally is saying, you need to walk this path, and it will come out in some way.
Some way. And I recognize too that I don't want to say it's easy for you and I to say it, but I know you have had a practice for a long time where it's like one of my teachers said, there is no retreat or meditation I could do or yoga practice that compares to the learning I had being next to my dad as he was dying for a month. And he's like, well, yeah, he's like, all of the practices you've been doing for all of the years, it's for this.
Yes.
So when we have the practice, like I know you've had a practice, and the students that are in your classes and the students in my classes and my clients who come to me for either coaching or myofascial work, like they maybe didn't have a practice, or maybe there was some crisis in their life or pain in their body that led them, but they've, you are sharing that, right? You work with people, and you are even channeling that through your work. That's not in the yoga realm. Not yoga. It's yoga. It's just uniting the mind and the body. And so I think there's a gift in that. And then some of my clients, I don't know if you ever had this question, like, will be like, I know, I'm sure you've heard this even from people who've practiced yoga, even a little bit, or any kind of mindfulness practice, presence practice. Like, what do people do who don't know about this?
Right.
Don't know that there is an internal resource. And I'm like, exactly. So I feel that, like, I feel a burning desire to share that as much as possible, that there is an internal resource, because we can see what happens with people who don't have or don't know they have the tools. We all have them because you can see it out there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's craziness going on.
Yeah.
That is, I feel, the result of not having a relationship with your own self.
Yeah.
That is fruitful.
That's the connected wisdom, right?
Connected wisdom. Yeah. It's like missing. So it's possible, it's available, but if you've never reached it and you're in a crisis, that's the hardest time that's why we do all of our practice.
And I talk about it, with my teacher trainers. It's like insurance. You can't get insurance when you need it. Right. Yeah. And so this is one of those things where, like you're talking about with your father, it clicked in without intention because you've been practicing it. Right. And then you knew how to be very present for him and not make it about you. And I think it's really hard to try to do all that in a crisis. And that's why it's just a practice over time where, I went through hard things last year and it was like, oh my gosh, like I clicked into breathing and didn't even mean to, like.
Exactly. So it's like,
it's like, oh, I'm autopilot. Doing it. Yeah. Like
autopilot. Instead of like beating yourself up.
And then going, and reacting in a way you don't want to react. Yeah. So this, we could go on forever, I'm sure.
We could.
So,
talk for a little bit.
Yeah. So I'd like to end with just some rapid fire questions. So pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Well, I'm gonna go spiritual, but it covers everything. So
okay, go on. All right, things or actions I don't have that I want.
I would say things or actions I don't have that I want. I would say it might sound like focus or maybe I hate this word, discipline. I could use more.
Well, and you talked about that in your younger phases of making a decision.
Yeah. And I think discipline is like focus, is remembering what you want.
Yeah.
That I could use more.
And taking out the noise. Yeah. Things or actions I do have that I want.
I think just that the connective wisdom piece and like the willingness to go deep inside and get uncomfortable.
Yes.
When something's going on, or like I feel things stirring up lately in me. I'm going to Sedona soon. I'm going to lead a retreat, and just anytime in general, going to Sedona, like your stuff gets stirred up.
Yeah. You being there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just this healing place. It's a wonderful place, a repository to take your stuff and leave it, but it stirs up before you go. So I am grateful for the
awareness
I have and the awareness that the wisdom of going deep.
All right. So things or actions I don't have that I don't want spiritually or health.
That I don't have that I don't want. I don't have the desire to watch the news.
I keep getting made fun of. I canceled cable. I have no idea what's going on in the world. Someone will be like, oh, did you know that happened? Nope.
Like if I need to know, I'm going to find out. Just trust
Someone will tell me.
Someone's going to tell me. I'll hear it. My sister will text me. I don't know. But I hear I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Cause things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Things or actions that I do have that I don't want. Oh yeah. That's like, it's kind of like what you and I are doing. I could just I don't say that. I don't even want to say I don't want it, but I could just have no concept of time.
Yeah.
Long, and it's wonderful, but sometimes in the world of an entrepreneur and having appointments and sessions, it's kind of helpful.
You gotta have to have an end. Yeah.
Yeah. So to know that little that container.
So is there anything that we didn't cover today, or anything you want to leave the listeners with for the end of this interview?
Gosh. I think we said so much that was really in my heart, and we kind of built on that. And so I think probably just that piece of us recognizing that we do have this internal wisdom, this infinite wisdom that is based in the body, and that, when we have a pain in our body, or if it's even something that's recurrent, or headaches or back pain or pelvic pain, whatever it is, belly aches, digestive issues, that's our body speaking to us. And so when we just take the time to say hello and answer that call of the body, just saying hello to something that's going on in your body, or putting your hand where your body's hurting, it is actually you being in the present moment. And that's an expansive thing. So that's kind of a piece that is really, I think, very meaningful. And we all have a body, and we're all here in our bodies. So why don't we see the body's communication as information for us? Yeah, and then also, so I talk a lot about this. If you go to my website, kristivitali.com, I do have a lot of information. I have my blog posts that talk a lot about that, and the emotional component, and the whole big picture of really authentic and complete healing in our wholeness. So the parts of us get kind of split up in a crisis, but we learn to include all of the parts of us. So I write a lot about that. And, coming up here, late summer and in the fall, I'm going to have Connective Wisdom circles. I'm going to have some more of these. I have some coaching programs. And we do have, we call it ROAR. It's a Release on the Red Rocks retreat that I'm having twice a year. We do have one spot left, April 20th. Amy, if you want to come out to Sedona.
That's too hard to resist.
I know.
I was just with you. What was September?
In September.
Yeah, it was amazing.
We'll be there in September again. So it's just wonderful to be in nature and to be on the Red Rocks, and there's something special there. We go out, and most of our retreat, it's all outdoors, and people get one-on-one treatments and sessions if they want that. But it's just kind of like the whole yummy package, and being able to leave your daily life for a little bit and the patterns of daily life to just get away. So know that it exists.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with all of us and stories. And I just appreciate you being here today.
Likewise, I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me on, Amy.
And now for my mindful moments during my interview with Kristi, which actually could have gone on probably for even longer, as you saw when we started really getting into it. But I really enjoyed learning about her grandparents and how the effect of that community, that village that her grandparents really created through their immigration to the United States and becoming entrepreneurs early on, and how they really kind of built up not only their businesses, but where they lived all around each other and centered their lives around their community, impacted her parents, that eventually impacted herself as she was moving on into adulthood. That we talked about, really in this conversation, much of it was centered around her father, that had the courage to break away from a small town and really take a risk to change the trajectory of her family, of going to college, and the kind of hard work that she not only saw from her family in their small town, but also through her father, of really building a career and what that took. And she talked about how she really started off as shy and quiet when she was young, and how she learned from the courage that she watched her father and the support that she got from her mother as well, that she called more fire, that inspired her to really do what she loved and have the courage to break free from any preconceived notion of what she thinks she should be versus what resonate with it. And one thing that I think was important is sometimes we define ourselves by a role or a career or a title. And when she was looking for what she wanted to do with her career, one thing that she did know was that she did not want to sit at a desk. And sometimes those are the things we have to figure out before we're actually deciding, would a career fit with us or not? And she also had this background of being very athletic and physical and understanding how she could kind of mold that into a career. And one of the things that really resonated with her was her relationship with her father and in Girl Scouts, of him having this compass, and this compass really kind of strung through her entire story all the way to his passing, of maybe never knowing the answer, but giving space to the journey of where you need to go. And I think for many of us, we're always trying to jump to the finish line or jump to the answer or jump to the result, rather than just following that inner compass and enjoying the journey as we learn, as we grow, and noticing along the way those success points. And even when we go through hard times, whether that's in our career, whether that's in our family life, personally, whatever that has to be, is how do we sit with the uncomfortable and make sure that we are not jumping ahead of it and not learning from the uncomfortable moments, because it's in those uncomfortable moments that we actually learn and grow the most. And also understand where we're putting our energy. Are we shifting too much to things that we cannot control? And what are the things we can control? So when we're going through hard times, how do we assess that and observe that for ourselves? And the only times we can really do that is when we get still and we allow ourselves to observe. And as thoughts come up for us, we can ask the question, can we control it or can we not control it? And if we cannot control it, how do we release that? How do we allow that to be released from our body, whatever that might be, through physical activity, through meditation, through, if we're going to get a massage, go for a walk, whatever we need to do to release the things that we cannot control so that our brain is not targeting those things, and actually sitting in the things that we can and making a true list of that. And so we talked about the infinite wisdom that we have in our bodies when we choose to listen, to observe, and that inner compass that allows us to have the roadmap to healing and feeling more whole, and what is the path to get there. Oftentimes we don't allow ourselves to listen because we're in a rush to get to the finish line or to feel better or whatever that is. But sometimes that listening process exposes the most important things that we need to know in order to get to the other side and feel whole again. I want to thank you for listening to this interview. Hopefully you were able to take as many great nuggets away as I was. And if you think that it would help someone, please share, subscribe to this podcast, and share some of the stories that you heard as well. Thank you for your support of this podcast and listening to these episodes. Hopefully that you're finding that they are helping you in your daily life as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.